Welcome back to another episode of Offbeat Adventures. We're standing here once again on the grade of the former Canadian Northern Railway and later Canadian National Railways, Dorion and then subsequently Kinghorn Subdivision. We are on the west side of Shadow Creek Road, which you can see right here in front of us, which is at the southern end of what is known as Orient Bay, here in the municipality of Greenstone, Ontario. And so here you can see the grade kind of stretching back to the north in front of us, Orient Bay, or the bottom part of Orient Bay, just to the east. And so what we're going to be doing today is we are going to be working our way to the south and then sort of turning west, following the grade here from Shadow Creek Road all the way to, or very close to, the station at East McCurdy. So for the first little bit here, we're going to be kind of following along the southern part of Orient Bay, and then where it meets, or where Keemle Creek empties into the bay, and then eventually Keemle Lake, and then farther up to Shamrock Lake. So this exploration today is actually a redo. So I've been on this section of grade actually several times. I was first here last summer when we did the initial video, and then I wanted to come back and redo this section for a variety of different reasons. And then I was actually here a few weeks ago. Today is the 30th of October, and so I was actually here right at the beginning of October, so I believe the 3rd or the 4th of October, and doing a little bit of exploring and a little bit of hunting with my son. And you'll actually see some of the clips from that. So I did shoot some video while I was out that time to feed into this video. So you'll notice today, again, it is the 30th of October, so it's right at the end. It's actually a pretty nice day. It's a little bit cool. When I started the hike, it was about 2 degrees Celsius. I've got bundled up, kind of got my my gloves on, and I've got my skull cap to keep my shiny head nice and warm. A little bit of a breeze now that we're kind of going to the south here. You can see that it's kind of cloudy, which is perfect, because we are going to be heading south, and then eventually almost southeast. And if the sun was out, that would have been very, very problematic, because we would actually be going right into the sun, which at this time of the year is very low on the horizon. You can see that all the leaves pretty much are down on the trees. Gives us a lot of great vision. The only bad thing is that we got some rain yesterday, so the bush is a little damp. But I think we've kind of looked at and explored everything that we've kind of want to do on this section. So here you can see Orient Bay. The highway, the Trans-Canada Highway, is just on the other side, and you can hear the traffic kind of zooming back and forth. Right up alongside of us here, you can see these huge rock ridges. These are the Pijitawabik Palisades. Basically it's a huge rock formation. This bay actually used to be an outlet for Lake Nipigon. So this is a bay which forms part of Lake Nipigon. Lake Nipigon is to the north. And so Orient Bay connects with Pijitawabik Bay, which the Palisades are named after. Pijitawabik means Bay of the Rock Faces in Ojibwe, I believe. And so you'll hear some of the traffic as we move along, because we are going to be moving fairly close to the highway here. You can see some of the cars and trucks. Again, you can see the Palisades. So while we got a moment here, as we run along the bay, we'll do our usual history lesson. So this line was constructed by Canadian Northern Railway between 1911 and 1914. It was going to be one of the final pieces in Canadian Northern's transcontinental ambitions. So the Canadian Northern Railway Company actually got its start back in the late 1890s, acquiring some railway lines in Manitoba, and then their first big project, here you can see a collection of items that somebody has put together. You can see some tie plates and some rail anchors. I always have to remember to tilt my head a little bit farther down. The angle of what I see and what the camera sees is a little different. And so, as it was said, Canadian Northern's first big ambition was to build a line between the then city of Port Arthur to Winnipeg. Port Arthur is now the city of Thunder Bay. And basically, the idea was, you can see the beauty here of the bay. The idea was to provide an alternate route to the Canadian Pacific Railway and then try to serve some of the agricultural areas of the Canadian West that had not been accessed by the Canadian Pacific, particularly the northern part of the Canadian prairies. And so they began building lines all throughout the prairies, and then eventually they started building and acquiring lines north from Toronto, eventually reaching the Sudbury area. Now, it was around this point that they realized that the owners of the company, so Donald Mann, William Mackenzie, who was the president, realized that in order for their company to be viable, they needed a transcontinental route. They needed a transcontinental line. Now, unfortunately, they were very, very reluctant to do that because of the huge projected cost, particularly building through areas like this one. The route from Sudbury, specifically Ruel, to Port Arthur was about 500 miles of construction through some very, very difficult terrain, which you can see around us. And so they were very hesitant to build. They did try to arrange or make a running rights agreement with Canadian Pacific, but they were not able to come to an agreement, and so they were forced to build. And so again, the line was built between 1911 and 1914. So here you can actually see some pieces of a telegraph pole. Now, when I was here, not this past summer, so the summer of 2020, there was actually a sign here. So there was a speed sign. I believe it was a 25-mile-an-hour speed sign, and it was right here. Unfortunately, it's disappeared. So I'm assuming that somebody has picked it up, unfortunately. Anyway, so the line was completed in 1914. So New Year's Day 1914, the last spike was driven, and the line opened for traffic in 1915. Now, unfortunately, shortly thereafter, Canadian Northern began running into financial difficulties. A lot of the construction costs had put a huge strain on the company and its finances, particularly building this section and building through the mountains of British Columbia. So by 1917, the company was in really, really bad shape and actually had to be taken over by the Canadian government. And then in 1918, the Canadian government merged or amalgamated, or however you want to word it, Canadian Northern with another group of bankrupt Canadian government-owned railways known as the Canadian Government Railways. And that merger, here you can see the bay again, that merger produced Canadian National Railways. And so this line became part of the Canadian National fold, and the nationalization process was completed in 1923, so 5 years later, after the incorporation of the Grand Trunk lines. And so in 1923, the name of this line changed. It had originally been the Nipissing Subdivision of Canadian Northern Railway, and then eventually it became the Nipissing Subdivision of Canadian National Railways, and in 1923 became the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian, this little discombobulated here. So after 1918 became the Nipissing Subdivision of Canadian National Railways, and then in 1923 became the Dorion Subdivision of Canadian National Railways. I just wanted to stop for a second here. You can actually see, so it is fall. It was a very, very dry summer. You can see up on the ridge there, I don't know how well you can see it on the camera, but there is a beautiful waterfall that's coming down the side of the ridge. That waterfall actually forms what is called Gorge Creek. And I believe we're actually going to be going over part of Gorge Creek at some point a little bit later on. So I just wanted to point that out. So after 1923, this railway line continued as it was up until 1960, when Canadian National changed its name. They went from being Canadian National Railways to just Canadian National Railway, dropping the S, the plural, at the end of railways, and adopting the modern CN worm kind of logo. And what CN did was they actually merged this line, this subdivision, the Dorion subdivision, with the more easterly Kinghorn subdivision. And so basically that produced one line running all the way from Long Lac to then Port Arthur, now Thunder Bay. And the line continued to operate until 2005, when CN decided to discontinue service on the line. And then starting in 2008, they began pulling up the rails on the line, and that process was complete by 2010. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to pull up here really quick in a second. You can actually see there's a base of a telegraph pole right there. You can see that beautiful little waterfall up ahead. We're going to pause for a second here, and we're going to continue our journey to the south. All right, so we're back in the saddle here. We've got a couple of stops coming up very shortly, so I'm just going to zip you ahead to those stops. So just enjoy the view here. Okay, so our first point of interest here is we actually have a mileage marker, or a milepost marker. And so here you can see the milepost 96 marker. And so again, that is the mileage on the Kinghorn subdivision. The mileage for the original lines is a little bit different. The Kinghorn was measured from Long Lac to Thunder Bay. The original line was measured from Jellicoe to Port Arthur, aka Thunder Bay. And so what we have to do to calculate the mileage is we actually have to subtract 49.7 miles. And so the mileage on the original line, the Nipigon subdivision, and then subsequently the Dorion subdivision, becomes 46.3. So that is the original mileage, 46.3. All right, let's just plug along. And we've got another stop just right up there. So I'll zip you ahead to that one, and we'll have to stop and jump off the bike there. All right, so we've arrived at our next point of interest here. We're going to jump off the bike to take a look at this. And so again, you can see the highway very close to us. So what we have here, and I don't know if you know if you can see it down there, we actually have a very, very large poured concrete culvert. You can kind of see the western side of it over here. This is the only one like this that I've ever seen on this line. I've been over probably about 3/4 of the line by this point. I've never seen one quite like this. The railway profile maps describe it as a bridge, and maybe I'll throw that up on the screen right now so you can see that. But in any case, I kind of look at this kind of a little bit more as a culvert. So what we'll do is we'll drop down and go take a look at it. All right, so we made our way down here to the east side of the bridge. Here you can kind of see the southern end of Orient Bay looking towards the north. So here's the side profile of this culvert or bridge as it's described in CN documentation. So you can see basically there's two channels, right? So this is basically where Orient Bay eventually becomes Keemle Creek and flows to the south, and eventually goes into the Nipigon River, Lake Helen, and eventually into Lake Superior. So one of the interesting things you'll notice as we get a little bit closer here is you'll kind of see the very interesting sort of contrast with this. You can kind of see the north side. It looks a little bit more kind of original here, and I don't quite understand what's kind of going on here. If there was an extensive amount of reconstruction that was done to the southern kind of opening. So the northern one looks kind of very, very in good shape. You can see it's very, very angular. You can actually see spots where the forms were attached. The southern side here looks very, very rounded. Looks like there's a lot of patchwork. Obviously, there's a lot of deterioration that's kind of happening to it, so I'm not quite sure. We'll jump up on the top here and have a look. All right, so we're up here on the top here on the eastern side, and again, you can kind of see the difference, right? You can kind of see how this side still seems like it's in pretty good shape, but you can see it's very, very straight, very angled. And then this side here, I don't know what happened here, if there was a lot of repair work that was done to the facing of it, but it's all kind of rounded. And so it is very, very different from the other side, from the north side of the opening. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to jump the grade and go take a look at what's happening on the west side. Okay, so we've made our way down here to the west side of the creek. And so here again, you can see the opening, and you'll notice again the difference between the north side channel and then the south side. And so here you can see again how seems very, very angular. Again, it seems like there was sort of a coating that was put on the southern side. You'll notice kind of the piece here of the little wing that comes out here, basically to prevent kind of erosion from sort of undercutting the side here. And again, you can see all of that material that was placed on the southern side. It actually kind of bulges out as compared to this northern side. Unfortunately, just because of the nature of the creek here, I can't get any closer. All right, so what we're going to do is we'll hop back up on the grade here, and we'll continue pushing our way to the south.